But first, every week there's more evidence that the Albanese government's other big crusade is collapsing. Now, the first, of course, was the Voice, being defeated. Now its other crusade, the green energy revolution, is turning into an even bigger disaster. I'll give you some amazing statistics today, but let me start with some context. An anecdote. Belinda Cleary, she's a Daily Mail reporter. She decided to drive her electric car, an $87,000 Hyundai Ioniq, from Sydney to Melbourne and back again, which turned out to be a mistake. Driving the Melbourne leg, for instance, meant stopping 3 times to recharge for as long as 35 minutes a pop. That recharging, the last one just a partial one to save time, cost $86 in total. And the return trip to Sydney was even worse, $120, and again, all those stops. And that bill, by the way, is more than she reckons refuelling would have cost her in petrol. In conclusion, driving that route in an electric car took longer, cost more, and involved a lot more anxiety, wondering where the next recharging station was. And I'll talk about that in a minute with a motoring expert. But it's no wonder then that sales of electric cars are not going as fast as the Albanese government expected. And pop, there goes yet another Albanese green scheme. See, the government thought it could make 89% of Australians who were buying new cars in 2030, 89% of them make them buy an electric one. Now, as I said at the time, this was a joke. I mean, you'd have to be a complete moron to think this would happen. And you've got to ask, does this government of dreamers have any idea about the realities as it faffs around now with schemes to make you buy these expensive electric cars, like it's planned to ban cheaper petrol ones that we prefer? But now the Federal Transport Department has warned the government quite directly that its dreams are dust. The department says electric cars won't make up 89% of new car sales in 7 years, won't even make a third of that. Try 27%, if that. So another failure. Another scheme to cut our emissions, looking pretty cactus. So how is the government's big green dream now working out? Well, we already know the government's way behind in rolling out wind farms. Costs have soared as well. The 10,000 kilometres of transmission wires it needs to join them all up, also way behind, also way over budget. The Snowy project, it needs to store renewable energy for when we need it, again, way behind, 10 times over budget. So now everywhere you look, the government's targets for 2030, they're a mess, despite the spending of billions of borrowed dollars. I mean, you just count the targets. It's 43% emissions reduction target, in huge strife. It's 82% renewable energy target. Industry leaders agree it's hopeless. It's 89% electric vehicle target. It's just been told it's impossible. It's promised $275 cut in power bills. Well, as you know, that's a joke. So fail, 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 and fail. Now, this is important. And not just because we're paying much more for our energy and for nothing. It's also important because this government is still struggling to get back to the basics, the cost of living, which this mucking around with green produce is just making worse. Energy bills, anyone? The government keeps getting distracted by these idiotic crusades, the Voice and global warming, and distracted too by the Prime Minister's constant travelling, because there's no focus at all. Well, today, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, he did give a speech to tell us that, by golly, he at least is delivering on this cost of living stuff, this economy, although he was short of examples and very long on buts.
Among all of the countries that we compare ourselves with, we are in a better position than most, if not all, of those countries. Obviously, growth is slowing in our economy. Confidence at a consumer level is relatively low, but we have a very resilient labour market. Business investment has been really quite remarkably strong, and we have other advantages as well, particularly when it comes to what we sell the world, the prices that we're getting, and a range of other benefits as well.
All right, rosy picture, as rosy as you could make it, but in fact the government is setting very unfortunate records. And the headlines tell the story, like record immigration intake, which is producing record house prices, making buying a home a luxury just for the rich. Like record inflation rate, or the highest of advanced economies. Like record productivity, low productivity growth in 60 years. And another record amongst the highest electricity prices in the world. I mean, what is this government doing and where is it going? People are screaming for relief and you're seeing this instead. When will it stop dreaming and start producing? And the thing is here, I mean, I think Jim Chalmers is suddenly thinking, Albanese on the skids is my chance here. Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, actually seems to think his record of achievement, or whatever you want to call it, is one that could make him your next Prime Minister. I mean, you've got, this Prime Minister playing the tourist, little interest in economics. And so Chalmers is out there fluffing his feathers and clearing the decks. I mean, did you see that puff piece last weekend on him in the Sydney Morning Herald, where he announced he's gone on the wagon, which, of course, as you know, is what Labor MPs do when they want to be Prime Minister. Bob Hawke, for instance, Albanese also cut off whatever it was that was making him fat and all that kind of stuff. Now, in Chalmers' case, this, oh, look, I've gone off the booze, is also a built-in excuse. It's a protection wall. Take this confession from this article, Chalmers speaking. Until 3 years ago, he said, my main way of winding down was to drink beers and wines at night on the couch. And it wasn't one or two. And the reporter then responds, well, there's also talk of you cutting a bit loose socially around Parliament House. To that, Chalmers responds, because I was drinking too much. So you've got to ask what that actually means, that Chalmers was cutting a bit loose socially when he was working in Parliament House. But don't you worry about that, because whatever it was, the booze made Chalmers do it and is off the booze now, so that's all you need to know, which is very convenient for him. But perhaps the Treasurer should talk less about his drinking and the Prime Minister do less of that dreaming, because I think it is high time that they both just got down to the hard and boring work of making life less hard for everyone else.